Congressman Ron Paul is joining us here in the studio. Whenever he's here, people listen in from all over the country. You have probably one of the most hardcore groups of people following you of any of the presidential candidates. I should say that's not exactly correct. You have more volunteers who will follow you and crawl over broken glass for you. There are a couple of other candidates. One I'm thinking of in particular has more paid people who will participate. But you have a real dedicated core of people, don't you?
We do, and I'm very pleased and very proud of that. And I claim that the message is a good message, and it's a very pro-American, pro-constitutional message, and it has good economics behind it and good policies, and I think that's why they hear it and decide, well, this is what we want to stand for, and this is what we want to work for.
Well, this morning, in just about an hour, we're going to let people listen in on the Obama press conference on the raising the budget ceiling. And the debt ceiling, rather. And he's going to communicate. He's going to have a press conference. He doesn't have them too often, so especially since August 2nd is the theoretical budget ceiling, debt ceiling deadline. This is kind of an important moment in U.S. history. We've only defaulted, or technically defaulted, a couple of times in our history. I think once was in 1790. The other, 1933, I think it was, when they started to call back in. They said, hey, we're not going to, it's illegal for Americans to own gold. And sort of a semi-default in 70-something with 71 with Nixon, saying not only is we're not going to allow people to own gold, we're going to just get off the gold standard. So some people saying that this is unprecedented is not exactly correct, is it?
You're absolutely right. Matter of fact, we're currently defaulting all the time because when you get dollars back, if you invested in a treasury bill 10 years ago,
right,
and you're taking your money today,
right,
you might be getting 50 cents on the dollar. I mean, it's been very, very bad.
Right.
So, but that is the purpose of a central bank, is to deceive the people and defraud the people.
It's been working.
Because if you'd have done it 100 years ago when the Fed was started, you'd be getting 2 cents back on the dollar. And back then, they actually had 100-year bonds. And, of course, they defaulted with the gold. And they're going to continue to default. This scare tactics, and I suspect what the president will say, that, it's going to be a total disaster if we don't raise the debt limit to justify, the continued spending. But and my guess is that there will be some type of agreement. I think they'll scare the people enough. They did it, with the bailout. If we didn't bail out the banks and Wall Street,
right,
that it would be the end of our Western civilization. And yet, it didn't help the people at all. I mean, we still had a very bad recession. We're still in the middle of it, and people are still losing their houses.
Well, they did the same thing internationally. They said, hey, if we don't bail out Greece, the whole system can come down. And they gave them access to billions more over the weekend. Now they're talking about Italy. So, and that falls. Everything else falls apart. Now we're talking about the United States of America. Who's going to bail us out?
There's nobody else, and yet we're still bailing out those other countries indirectly because the IMF is involved, and we put money in the IMF. So the burden has always been falling on the dollar. But there'll be a time when people will finally say that the whole system is at fault. Today, the dollar, even this morning, the dollar was up rather sharply against other currencies,
right,
except the one currency, gold.
Right.
That is
gold
the ultimate currency.
$15.50 today.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate currency. But because the dollar might go up a few days against the euro, even long-term against other currencies, if you look at the last 30 years, it's been straight down. There was a time in 71 when we finally got rid of all linkage to gold. I think you got around 4 Swiss francs to the dollar. Now you get 1. So we've lost 75% against that currency. But ultimately, when the dollar goes down and you don't weigh it just against other paper currencies, what you weigh it against is what will the dollar buy. And I think that's what the American people are waking up to. They know every single day our dollars are buying less.
Well, you're one of the smart guys who saw this a generation ago. And last time you were here, I went through some of the investments that you've been making, all of in gold and in mining stocks, and you've been kicking butt for the last 30 years. Your investment's been doing extremely well. It took the rest of us a lot longer to catch on. You think most of us did?
Well,
or at least we're
a lot more.
beginning.
There's a lot more. Yeah, I can remember not too many years ago when people still believed in the stock market. Somebody on the air made fun of me. They said, "Just think of all the money you missed by not buying stocks." And I said, "Yeah, I was overly cautious. I was way too conservative. It was awfully foolish of me buying these gold coins at $35 an ounce."
So none of my darn business. But just how many did you buy?
Oh, that is a top secret.
I'll ask your wife later.
But coin collecting is still legitimate.
Put on your earphones, sir, because I want you to hear a soundbite from Secretary Geithner, who was on This Week over the weekend, and talking about what we're talking about.
Remember, we have to borrow now 40 cents for every dollar we spend. Now, on August 2nd, if Congress hasn't acted, we're left with the cash we have and the cash we're going to take in.
Wow. 40 cents. Just stay put with me here a second, because he embellishes that.
The longer we go into July, the more risk there will be in financial markets, more concern there is that America cannot get its act together to figure out how to solve this problem. And you'll see that reflected in higher interest rates and more concern, loss of confidence. And let me explain what happens on August 2nd. On August 2nd, at that point, we run out of the ability to borrow to meet our obligations.
Mm-hmm. My question to him would be, compared to what? Compared to continuing to raise the debt limit and continue to spend, then the catastrophe is much worse.
Why?
Because that's when you have runaway inflation, the destruction of the dollar, and loss of confidence in the dollar. So he says it's better to temporize, raise the debt limit, and continue to spend. And the two are very, very difficult. But I just think that we continue on this process, and the destruction of the dollar and the disruption, politically speaking as well as economically speaking, is much, much worse than saying we have to live within our means. But he paints this much worse than it really is, because you can have priorities. He doesn't have to default on not paying the interest, but it's a serious problem. But they have to agree to quit raising the debt limit and quit spending the money, and have priorities on the way we paid. Even the last time I was on your show, we brought up this subject. That why do we go through this manipulation of making token payments, or payments at least, to the Federal Reserve for the debt we have there? And that debt, is part of the national debt. Technically, you could take that off and have another year or so. I don't say that is the ultimate solution. I'm just saying that the crisis isn't nearly as bad as they paint it to be. They want the members of Congress to panic into doing their bidding.
Would that be different than paying the interest on the bonds that other countries have bought?
Absolutely. I mean, the Fed owns $1.7 trillion, so that interest has to be rather significant. And the Chinese don't even hold that much, approximately that much.
They've been bailing out, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they're having less all the time. So you never have to renege on paying that. But the destruction of a currency is much worse than getting your house in order. And I argue that if the markets took what we were doing seriously, let's say we wiped off $1.7 trillion of debt. That alone, that might just encourage them to continue to do it too, thinking it's just temporary. Well, we'll go back to spending for another year. But if it was in a package where the markets and the people realized, boy, they are serious. We got our house in order. We're going to cut. We're going to look at everything. We're going to not keep increasing the military spending. We're not going to continue to increase our entitlement system. This very year, our entitlements went up $5 trillion. New obligations. So something has to be done by that.
What was the cause of that spike?
The spike on the entitlements.
Right.
Oh, it's just routine. More people, the baby boomers retiring.
Inconsiderate jerks.
Yeah,
What makes them think they can just quit work like that?
just because they were paying into these. So a lot of people get this idea. Well, this is government insurance, and we've been paying into it for 30 years. Yeah. Don't we get something back? Oh well, no, sorry, we've already spent that money. It's already been blown overseas someplace.
Right, exactly. Well, the last part of the Geithner thing, he says, hey, we're going to have to go begging.
And every week, starting the week of August 2nd, we have to go out and finance roughly $100 billion in maturing obligations of the government. We make 80 million checks a month to Americans. 55 million people on Social Security benefits, millions more Americans at veterans benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, people who supply our troops in combat. 80 million checks a month. So on August 2nd, we're left with the cash on hand, the cash we take in. And we have to convince people to come and refinance $500 billion in maturing principal payments that come due in August.
Yeah, we have to actually convince people to buy our junk.
Yeah, and he's correct. It is a problem, but it sounds to me like he wants to paper it over, say that the debt can go up and we can continue to do this.
Well, the Obama administration wants to increase taxes by $1 trillion. And the Boehner side of the aisle, your side of the aisle, wants to cut spending by $4 trillion. I'm not sure if I'm up on the exact figures here at the moment, but I saw over the weekend Obama wants to get into the economy to bring in more. They call it bringing in more revenue, which means increasing taxes by $1 trillion. And the Boehner side says, well, we're not going to increase the debt ceiling, or at least the bargaining chip is. We'll even ponder that, but you have to commit to $4 trillion of cuts down the road. So what's the current state of the art here?
Well, I think it's credibility. For me to promise, if I would only vote to raise the national debt limit, that they're going to promise to cut in the next 10 years $4 trillion. I mean, who's going to believe that? I argue that only this year is what counts. That's the only budget that counts. Next year, it's another budget process. There's another emergency. There's another Congress coming. So these promises to cut later on, they have no meaning, and that's why the American people are upset. They want to be able to believe what the government is doing, and there's no trustworthiness. That people don't trust the government, what they tell us, and they can see this continuing. That's why people are saying enough is enough. Don't raise the debt limit, and that'd be one way where we could be forced to start cutting.
Well, there's another factor here. One of the things that they were kicking into the debate was, we'll ponder this if you will commit to starting the process of a balanced budget amendment. And I was wondering what Ron Paul thinks of the whole idea of a balanced budget amendment.
Well, we should have had that, I guess, when the Constitution was written. It might have helped, but then again, it's a lot of fluff. I'll vote for it and hope it works, but I'm not that optimistic. How many years might it take to get a balanced budget amendment?
If it can get through if the president would sign off on it, well, I think the president doesn't have to sign off on this, does he?
No, it goes to the states.
And if it passes a couple of times by, what, two-thirds?
Two-thirds, but
and then comes back to the people for a vote?
Yeah, and the amendments they're the amendments they're proposing all have loopholes. Well, if there's an emergency, if there's a war going on, 2/3 can cancel it out.
We've got 3 wars going on.
Yeah, so they canceled out the first week. The first week they pass it. But the other point I make about this, and we should have learned our lesson with this bailout, the Federal Reserve spent more money on the bailouts than the Congress did. They didn't get any permission, no appropriation, no authorization, and did it in secret. And we're fighting hard to get the information of what they've done. $3 trillion they messed around with and bailed out their friends. So it is absolutely out of control.
Last week, Greenspan says that was kind of an illusion anyway, because a lot of that money never got spent. It's just sitting still, and banks are sitting on that money.
That is true, but they're making money on it too. They get it for free from the Fed, and they can make 2 or 3%, maybe buying Treasury bills. Their balance sheets have worked out real well. At the same time, the depression that they were preventing ended up with the people who lost their jobs. Yes, they did park a lot of money in the banks, but that money is going to eventually leak out. There's going to be a way, and it's going to start bidding up prices, which is already done. There's going to be a lot of inflation yet to come.
Congressman Ron Paul is here in the studio.